Known as the City of Dreaming Spires, Oxford occupies an area of about 46 square kilometres in England's south-east, within the catchment areas of the Thames and Cherwell rivers. Although the city is home to more than 152,000 people, just over half of it is open space comprised largely of floodplain. Parts of the city are densely populated, but around half of Oxford's workforce lives elsewhere and commutes into the city by car, bus and train. Major job sectors include higher education, international publishing, tourism and hospitality. Small businesses also do well here. Recreation in Oxford has been shaped by its rivers and outdoor spaces. Walking and cycling along the riverbank, picnicking in the parks and meadows, boating, rowing, punting and angling, as well as nature watching and conservation are all popular local pastimes. Many people also like to grow their own food on the allotments dotted around the city. Oxford's annual temperature is between 7 and 15 degrees Celsius. Average annual rainfall is 660 millimetres. The city typically experiences temperatures of between 12 and 21 degrees at the height of summer, and 1.4 to 7.4 degrees in the dead of winter. Rainfall is distributed fairly evenly throughout the year, with an average of about 53.5 millimetres a month. However, vigorous Atlantic lows in autumn and winter can bring more rainfall during these seasons. The weather can be unpredictable, and Oxford has experienced heavy rainfall events and summer thunderstorms, as well as dry periods which can put pressure on water supplies. Since 2000, Oxford has experienced several serious flood events, with the worst occurring in July 2007. Around 2,100 properties were flooded, railway services were reduced, and several major roads were closed for 5 days, limiting travel in and out of the city. In the coming decades, it is likely that summers in Oxford will become increasingly hot and possibly drier, while winters will become wetter and milder. Based on projections provided by the UKCP09, under a medium emission scenario, by the 2050s, there is a 60% likelihood that average summer temperatures will rise by 1.8 degrees or more, and average winter temperatures will rise by 1.4 degrees or more, that winter rainfall will increase by 6.6% or more, and summer rainfall will decrease by up to 13.2%. Although hotter summers may bring water stress to the area during dry periods and pose some risks to vulnerable people, such as the elderly, the likelihood of more frequent floods is Oxford's main concern when it comes to climate change. Given the city's situation within a large river catchment area, the defence against overflowing rivers provided by the floodplain has in part been undermined by development, while several impediments to the course of the rivers cause flooding further upstream. The Thames and Cherwell flow through the city centre, encountering obstacles such as a railway line entering the city from the south and the Botley Road which crosses the floodplain. The rivers also flow through a mere 800-metre wide gap between the villages of Sandford and Kennington, just south of Oxford, which is rather a tight squeeze when water levels are high. But overflowing rivers are not the only cause for concern in Oxford. Surface runoff from intense rainfall can cause localised and flash flooding in areas outside of the floodplain, but can also add to water levels in rivers and watercourses. This can then result in more flooding happening several days later, even after rain has stopped. Some parts of Oxford are also susceptible to groundwater flooding. As well as being difficult to defend against, such flooding can happen before the rivers overflow, interact with and exacerbate river flooding, and persist after the river waters have receded. Finally, the capacity of the sewer system in Oxford may prove to be inadequate in the event of more intense and frequent rainfall. Little is known about the state of Oxford's sewers, many of which are more than a century old. The city and county councils are concerned that the sewers will not be able to cope with heavier rainfall events, yet it is not clear how severe sewer flooding could become in the future. It is expensive to deal with floods. The July 2007 floods cost Oxfordshire County Council nearly £3 million in damages to roads, bridges and properties. As mentioned earlier, flooding can also severely restrict railway services and also have an impact on outdoor recreation and local flora and fauna. So let's look at how increased flooding in the future might affect each of these in turn. More than 3,600 properties are currently located within the floodplain. With one of the highest annual population growth rates of cities in the UK, at 1.1%, there is ever-increasing demand for housing in Oxford. The properties already in the floodplain on Osney Island, in New Botley, New Hinsky, and in Wolvercote are the properties most vulnerable to flooding in the future. It is crucial that attempts to meet housing needs in the coming decades do not further encroach on the floodplain. Yet there are several such development proposals in the pipeline. For those living in the floodplain, the likelihood that climate change will bring more frequent heavy rainfall events is a great worry. Damage done by floodwaters can be extensive, and if there is a high volume of claims made to insurance and repair companies after a flood, the cleanup can be a long process. Businesses located in the floodplain, such as independent shops along Botley Road and offices and wholesalers in the Osney Mead Industrial Estate, have also suffered from past flooding due to a drop in trade or productivity and material damage. Oxford's growing population is likely to add more cars to its roads and more commuters to its rail services. During peak hours, traffic builds up along Botley and Abingdon roads, which have had to be closed for days at a time during past flooding. A stretch of the railway line near Old Abingdon Road has also been inundated in the past, and unless work is done to raise its height, it will not avoid flooding in the future. During recent floods, the effect of road closures could be felt within the city, where traffic backed up down other roads as drivers tried to use alternative routes to get to and from work. If such instances worsen in the future, due to a greater number of vehicles on the road and a more frequent need to divert traffic through the city centre away from flooded roads, air pollution in the city may increase, and the roads may become less friendly to the many cyclists who use them for their own daily commutes. Although the impact of flooding on outdoor recreation may not have a great monetary cost, an increase in flooding events may limit the amount and type of such recreation enjoyed by locals and visitors during wet periods. Several allotments within the city are located adjacent to the rivers and are vulnerable to water level rises, and flooded towpaths pose a danger to walkers and cyclists. Within Oxfordshire, 4 sites of special scientific interest, or SSSIs, make up the internationally designated special area of conservation known as the Oxford Meadows. The Oxford Meadows are all unimproved grassland meadows, supporting a diverse range of vegetation and wildlife. Only Port Meadow lies within the city boundaries, and it is also the only site in the UK known to host a long-term, non-introduced population of creeping marshwort, a protected species of flowering plant. Located along a stretch of the Thames, Port Meadow serves as part of the floodplain. As such, the vegetation that grows here, including the creeping marshwort, is dependent on a system of occasional river flooding, which replenishes nutrients in the soil. It is not certain how increased flooding might affect the health of creeping marshwort and that of Port Meadow as a whole. For some vegetation that grows here, excessive nutrient enrichment and anaerobic conditions may be harmful, while creeping marshwort may welcome the demise of competing grass species. As for Oxford's wildlife, it is not clear what impact climate change will have. Creatures such as hedgehogs may drown in floodwaters if they are hibernating under vegetation on the floodplain. But for birds such as geese and ducks, floodwaters in the city provide more space to bathe and find food. For Oxford, the future looks rather damp. Although some permanent flood defences exist within Oxfordshire, the City Council has responded to past flooding events by erecting temporary flood defences and distributing sandbags to residents whose properties are at risk. The Council's long-term adaptation plans have been restricted in part by a lack of national-level concern for Oxford's vulnerability to flooding, meaning that it has not received the funding or support it may need to improve the city's resilience to such events. The ad hoc responses of the past may prove insufficient in the future as flooding becomes a more frequent occurrence. Reducing vulnerability through adaptation is key. Some adaptive measures may be costly and laborious, such as reviewing and improving the state of Oxford sewers or raising vulnerable stretches of railway line. Others may involve not doing something, such as not building more developments on the floodplain. At the end of the day, Oxford's adaptation strategy must balance the needs of a growing population against the need of the city to become more resilient to climate change.